He didn't step into the cage to fight. He stepped in to perform. That was obvious from the way he spat sideways toward the cameras before the referee even raised his hand. The arena lights bathed him in white, sweat already gleaming on his tattooed shoulders, the roar of 20,000 people swelling like surf behind him. He grinned, raised the mic the announcer had shoved his way, and sneered, "Chuck Norris?" An old man too scared to ever test himself in a real octagon. The words cut through the noise. For a moment, even the commentators stopped mid-sentence. Then the reaction rolled like thunder. The younger fans, half-drunk, phones in the air, erupted in laughter, chanting the fighter's name, feeding on his arrogance. Older faces in the crowd stiffened, mouths tightening. Some booed, their voices drowned in the carnival of noise. It wasn't just an insult. It was a challenge hurled across generations, from a 23-year-old undefeated brawler to a legend who'd never asked for this kind of fight. He wasn't finished. Pacing the cage, pointing at the cameras circling like vultures, he declared, "Those internet jokes? That's all his legacy. Memes, hype. I'd break him in under a minute." His teammates outside the fence slapped the canvas, egging him on. The referee gestured for him to focus on the actual opponent waiting in the opposite corner, but the spotlight loved him too much to let go. Above the noise, you could hear the split. A boy in the rafters laughed so hard his soda spilled down his shirt. A gray-haired man in a collared shirt shook his head, muttering, "Disrespectful punk." A woman in a sequined top shouted back, "He's right! Norris is a myth." The air itself felt charged, as though the fight unfolding that night had already been eclipsed by one that might never happen. The bout went on. Fists and kicks traded in the cage, but much of the crowd was elsewhere, scrolling, tweeting, clipping the insult that was already sprinting through the digital bloodstream. Hashtags caught fire. Number Norris is afraid. Number Octagon reality. Number minute or less. The broadcast replayed his words again and again, the camera lingering on his grin as if it had been scripted. By the time his hand was raised, another victory, another body dropped. The story had already left the building. The chant wasn't his name anymore. It was the name he'd dragged into the cage, shouted back by kids who hadn't even been born when Chuck Norris's films filled drive-ins and VHS shelves. Norris, N-O-R-R-I-S, exclamation mark, half mocking, half daring. As the fighter strutted along the fence, pounding his chest, an uneasy energy lingered in the stands. Some older fans clapped politely, but their eyes stayed cold. Others folded their arms, disgusted. A man near the front row leaned to his friend and whispered, almost conspiratorial, "What if Norris answers him?" The words, barely audible under the thunder of the crowd, seemed to plant themselves in the air. The whisper carried more weight than the shouts around it. For just a second, the arena seemed to pause, holding its breath on the thought. Up in the broadcast booth, one commentator chuckled nervously. "I don't think we'll see that," he said into his mic, but the hesitation in his voice betrayed him. His partner leaned back, raising an eyebrow. "Don't be so sure," he muttered, off camera. On the floor, the young fighter demanded more attention, clambering onto the cage wall, spreading his arms wide as if he had already conquered not just his opponent, but the sport itself. His voice, hoarse from shouting, carried one last jab into the cameras. "Send him a contract!" Or better, send him a wheelchair. The arena broke again, half laughter, half outrage. The younger crowd filmed every second, eager to post, eager to provoke. The older crowd kept their seats, lips pressed thin, knowing lines had been crossed that could not be uncrossed. And somewhere, In the thick silence beneath the chants, the question hung heavier than all the noise. What if Chuck Norris did answer? Just wondering, where are you watching from? Write it down, bellow. By morning, the clip had left the arena and crawled into every screen. Highlights reels ran the insult between knockouts, the way weather runs between commercials. In diners, the audio stayed low, but you could still read the words off his mouth. On talk radio, hosts took turns sounding certain. Some callers said a kid with 12 wins had a right to call out anyone alive. Others said a line had been crossed that didn't have a return lane. The city felt electric in a way that made people drive a little faster and talk a little louder. He didn't answer on television. He didn't call a press conference. Late afternoon in Dallas, a plain pickup pulled into an unremarkable strip of warehouses where a jiu-jitsu school shared walls with a tire shop and a discount furniture store. Inside, the gym smelled like disinfectant and rubber mats and yesterday's sweat. 2 heavy bags swung just enough to thump the metal racks. An old radio stationed on a windowsill hissed through country and commercials. White belts lined up by the door, waiting for class, whispering in bursts, trying not to stare. He came in wearing sneakers and a washed-out t-shirt, a duffel on his shoulder. No entourage, no sunglasses. He nodded to the owner, a woman with cauliflowered ears and a kind voice who suddenly spoke softer than usual. The room reacted the way rooms do around a familiar piece of lightning. It quieted without being told. A cameraman, breathless from the parking lot, slipped in behind him, lens already up. Another followed with a mic he'd lifted from a trunk. Norris didn't wave them off, but he didn't feed them either. He set the duffel down and watched a pair of teenagers struggle through a guard pass until their exasperation edged into laughter. He showed one how to angle his hips without losing his base, then stepped back and let them fail forward. The questions finally came, jostling on top of each other. Did you hear what he said? Will you respond? Is there going to be a fight? He didn't take the mic. He didn't even face the cameras at first. He traced a finger across a scuff in the mat with an absent-mindedness that felt deliberate, then looked up. I don't care for talk, he said, voice level. If someone wants to learn the difference between strength and pride, I know how to show it. The sentence wasn't long, but it landed like a tool finding the right fit. The room exhaled. A white belt swallowed an awed grin. The gym owner's hand paused over the clipboard and then finished writing a name as if to prove the world could still proceed. The quote jumped out of the gym faster than the men who'd filmed it. Within an hour, it sat under every headline, stripped of the scuffed mat and the soft radio. Comments piled up, the fun kind and the mean kind, the ones that try to hurt and the ones that try to bless. Teenagers stitched the line into reaction videos, mocking and admiring without picking a side. Veterans of older fights posted grainy pictures from the 70s and wrote long paragraphs about basics. In the space between, the usual fools and prophets predicted outcomes like weather. It wasn't simply a call-out anymore. It was a referendum on what people wanted to believe about violence and age. The fighter doubled down. He went live from a hotel room that looked rented by the hour, even if it wasn't. Behind him, a manager paced with an expression that said, "This was only good news." "He can show me anything," the kid swore, eyes bright with the kind of hunger that doesn't think 2 moves ahead. "We'll sign tomorrow." No rules that coddle, no movie magic. He gets real life now. The comments lit up so fast, the scroll became a flicker. On the gym floor, class began. The owner clapped once, and the line of students bowed out and then down. Norris helped a man in his 50s figure a shrimping drill without wrecking a hip. He moved slower than the videos remembered. and better than the videos had ever caught. The economy of an old craftsman unhurried by the competition of youth. A blue belt asked for a photo between rounds, then apologized for asking, which made the moment human again. Norris smiled and stood still long enough for the shutter and one extra heartbeat. Afterward, he sat on the edge of the mat and laced his shoes. The cameraman circled back, more careful this time. "He says you're afraid," the man tried, lowering his voice like respect might coax a different answer. Norris slid the lace under and pulled it tight. "I've been afraid plenty of times," he said. "It's useful. It tells you where to slow down." He tied a double knot and looked up. "Pride doesn't tell you anything. It only shouts outside. The sky was the color Dallas gets when heat starts to think about going home. Flat, yellow, patient. The strip mall neon hummed awake. Somewhere, a freight train moaned. Phones in the parking lot vibrated, notifications stacking on each other until they were just a general alarm. A local sports station rolled vans around the corner and parked crooked. A woman from a morning show practiced a smile in the mirror on the visor, then snapped it shut and grabbed a mic. He stayed inside. He worked one more round with the teenagers, then handed the blue belt a roll of tape because it had finally become what the body demanded more than heroics. Word came in through the owner's son, cheeks lit by his screen. The promoters were circling, networks sniffing for angles, a joint media availability, with both men floated for Thursday in Vegas. Everyone called it an opportunity. Everyone meant a spectacle with good lighting. He gave no confirmation. He rinsed his hands in the small bathroom and dried them on a towel that had seen better days, then thanked the owner and shouldered the duffel. In the hallway, a kid in an oversized hoodie asked, "Is he really gonna fight you?" Norris looked at him as if the answer mattered more to the kid than to anyone else. "I'm going to keep the boy in that video from living the rest of his life small," he said. "How we get there depends on how loud the other man wants to be." When he stepped out, the evening pressed warm on his face. Cameras shifted, hungry. He didn't stop. No podium, no statement, just a short wave that didn't quite qualify as a wave. Engines turned over. Someone shouted a question that dissolved into the hum of the lot. Across town, the fighter posted another clip, this one filmed in a weight room where plates clanged and friends cheered. "Thursday," he barked at his own reflection on the phone screen, "face to face. Let's see if Grandpa shows." Back at the gym, the owner locked the door and slid the metal grate down out of habit. The radio clicked off. The parking lot lights stuttered and steadied. A text came into the owner's phone from a number she didn't have saved, with a venue name she recognized and an hour that made sense. The town, and then the country, waited to see if silence could hold a line under studio lights. And somewhere in Vegas, a microphone sat on a table between two empty chairs. They set the stage like a prize fight without gloves. Two chairs on a riser, a long table wired with microphones. Cameras stacked 3 rows deep. The ballroom smelled of cleaning solvent and nerves. A promoter in a shiny jacket promised respectful dialogue, which only made the crowd laugh louder. Everyone knew why they were there. The young fighter arrived first, hood up, chewing gum like it was fuel. He refused the chair, choosing to stand center stage with his arms crossed, his team behind him in matching shirts. He tapped the mic twice, enjoying the pop through the speakers. "So, this is the legend? A meme machine. I break myths for breakfast." The younger fans howled. Older ones booed. He grinned wider, feeding off both. Then Norris walked in. No fanfare, just a plain jacket, soft shoes, a duffel carried by himself. The noise thinned instantly, as if the room had been put on mute. He didn't take the mic at first. He just set his hand on the back of his chair and looked out. The quiet stretched. The kid couldn't stand it. He stepped closer, shoulder brushing against Norris's. "Say something," he barked. "Tell them you're scared." Norris finally lifted the mic, speaking low, each word clear. "Noise isn't strength. Strength is what survives the noise." The line dropped heavy. The room shifted. Applause from some, murmurs from others. The fighter forced a laugh. "Endure this," he said, bumping Norris harder this time. The crowd gasped. Norris didn't push back. He stepped forward just enough to erase the distance, eyes steady. "Be careful what you start." The silence that followed was sharper than any shout. The fighter blinked, off balance for the first time, then recovered, jabbing the air in front of Norris's face. "Your kicks? Tricks. Your punches? Angles. Thursday, no edits, no excuses. Sign or step aside," reporters shouted questions. "Is there a contract? Will you fight?" The promoter jumped in, sweating. "Thursday night, Vegas, televised exhibition," he announced, trying to wrestle control back. Cameras zoomed in on Norris. He shook his head. "Contracts are for lawyers. Character is for men." The fighter's grin faltered. He shoved Norris outright, palms to chest. The ballroom erupted. Screams, cheers, phones held high. Security stepped forward, then froze, waiting. Norris absorbed it, shoulders rolling with the push. He didn't strike back. He closed the gap again, calm as stone, and spoke softly enough that the cameras had to lean in. "Don't pick a fire you can't carry." The crowd roared, divided and hungry. The fighter turned back to them, arms raised, trying to turn humiliation into victory. "See?" He talks. "I fight." The younger fans screamed approval. Others stared at Norris, unmoving, and understood something deeper had shifted. He didn't answer with words. He set the unused chair aside, clearing the space between them like a man tidying a mat. His silence weighed heavier than the fighter's noise. Phones caught every angle, every twitch, every breath. The promoter rushed to fill the void. "Thursday night! Confirmed! Both men, face to face again. Don't miss it." Reporters scribbled. Flashes popped, and the crowd surged with excitement. They thought they'd just seen the start. But those watching closely, those who saw the flicker of doubt cross the kid's face, the calculation in his glance at his corner, knew the real fight had already begun, long before fists touched skin. The clip of the face-off had done its work. Overnight, the headlines sharpened themselves. Chuck versus MMA star. Old lion against young wolf. Talk shows played it on loop, one host laughing at the kid's bravado, another leaning into the pause Norris had held like it was a weapon. Social feeds boiled with edits, slow-motion shots of the shoulder shove, memes sprouting faster than anyone could count. For once, the fight business didn't have to invent a story. The story was already eating everything in its path. Promoters smelled blood and money in equal measure. They announced what they called an open sparring exhibition. Not quite a fight, not quite a show. Tickets vanished in hours. Even people who had never watched a bout in their lives wanted a seat. Airlines bumped passengers to add more flights into Vegas. Taxi drivers rehearsed their opinions so they could sell them along with rides. Every casino bar turned its TVs toward the countdown. Inside the arena, the noise felt alive. Cameras buzzed like insects, flashes stabbing the air. The floor trembled from bass-heavy walkout music, fans pounding on the rails, strangers shouting at each other as if they had been rivals for years. A sea of glowing screens painted the stands in cold blue light, each person eager to record a piece of what they believed would become legend. Backstage, the young fighter held court. Sweat beaded his forehead, but he grinned into every microphone shoved at him. "Tonight," he declared, "this legend walks out different. I'll make sure he never dares step onto a mat again." He laughed, flashing a mouthguard like jewelry. His cornerman laughed too, less out of belief than habit. He posed with fists raised, veins standing out in his arms, then smacked his chest and pointed toward the curtain. When the music hit, he strutted out, bouncing, arms wide as if to embrace the chaos he'd manufactured. His followers screamed, some waving homemade signs. He shouted insults into a camera lens inches from his face, his voice already hoarse from adrenaline. "This is my time. Old men don't belong here." The arena roared approval and disapproval in equal measure, the volume doubling back on itself until it became a wall of sound. Then the lights shifted. A simpler entrance. No music, no entourage. Norris walked in wearing a plain GI top, no theatrics, his steps measured. He didn't wave, didn't pose. He walked to the bench, sat down, and looked out at the arena as though he were studying it, not basking in it. The change was immediate. A hush, small but undeniable, spread through the crowd. For a few seconds the chants faltered, as if the arena itself recognized that something different had entered. The hush cut sharper than any insult, and the young fighter's grin tightened when he noticed it. The referee called them forward. Gloves touched, more out of ritual than respect. The bell rang. The kid came out like a spark thrown into gasoline. Fast combinations, sharp kicks, his shoulders rolling with youthful arrogance. He barked with each strike, trying to intimidate through noise and speed. Every time he lunged, fans jumped to their feet, cheering like the knockout was already written. But Norris didn't meet fire with fire. He moved just enough. A small slip of the head, a block that seemed casual, a half-step back that left punches slicing empty air. His breathing didn't change. His eyes never blinked from the fighter's chest, reading the rhythm under the noise. The crowd roared louder, but pockets of them began to murmur. They could see it. One man throwing storms of fists, the other not even flinching, as if he had already read the ending. The kid's aggression looked spectacular, but it wasn't landing. Norris's calm made the contrast unbearable. The fighter snarled, frustrated. He swung harder, wider, his footwork sloppier now under the weight of expectation. Norris caught a kick on his forearm, turned it aside with no flourish, and stepped back into stillness. The kid charged again, sweat flying, veins bulging. Norris tilted just enough to let the hook miss by a breath, then tapped a counter jab against the shoulder. Not hard, but precise, a reminder. The crowd's noise cracked in half. Half of them screamed for violence, the other half began to realize they were watching something else entirely. This wasn't a brawl. It wasn't even a contest yet. It was a lesson unfolding in real time. The cameras closed in on Norris's face. Calm, almost too calm. He didn't gloat, didn't sneer, didn't talk. Just eyes locked, steady, making the younger man's rage look small in comparison. The commentator's voice broke through the static of the broadcast. "This doesn't look like a fight," he whispered. "It looks like a teaching." And at that exact moment, the young fighter barked in frustration, charging with even more fury, while Norris's silence grew heavier, like a weight pressing down on every breath in the room. The round began like a storm no one could quite track. The young fighter lunged forward with bursts of speed, fists slapping the guard, feet stomping for effect. He wanted the crowd to believe noise was pressure. Every missed swing came with a grin, every slip answered by a clap of his own gloves. To the untrained eye, it looked like dominance. To anyone who'd seen a fight up close, it looked like desperation disguised as swagger. When he couldn't break through clean, he started bending the rules. A clinch became an excuse for a sharp elbow inside the referee's command to break. A heel kick clipped the outside of the knee, mean and ambiguous. On the fence, he pressed his forearm across the throat, letting go only when the official barked. The crowd picked up on it. Chants split into rival choirs, half cheering, half booing, the sound jagged enough to scrape nerves raw. The kid leaned into it. He winked at cameras, made faces when warned. "This is a fight, isn't it?" he shouted, his breath ragged but still wrapped in arrogance. He shoved on the brake, slipped in a body shot just late enough to count as dirty. The referee snapped his name, but the smirk never left his face. The exchange turned rougher. A clash in the center, sweat flying, both men in close. The kid's forehead pressed hard, too hard, almost deliberate. Then it came. A sudden inside elbow, short and brutal. The sound cracked, flat, unmistakable. Norris's head snapped slightly. When he stepped back, the crowd saw it. The thin, dark line opening above his brow. For a heartbeat, the arena fell silent, shocked. Chuck Norris was bleeding. The copper smell reached the first rows before the cameras zoomed. On screens across the country, millions leaned closer, seeing for the first time something they thought impossible. It wasn't catastrophic, just a cut, but it was real. And real was enough. The fighter's grin widened into something feral. He pointed at the blood, shouting, "That's how legends fall!" He paraded around the cage as if he'd already won, chest heaving, veins bright against his neck. His corner banged the fence, screaming. The referee checked quickly. "You good?" he asked. Norris nodded once, small, controlled. The fight resumed. The crowd detonated into two halves. One screamed triumph, drunk on spectacle. The other howled in anger, demanding order. Security along the apron shifted uneasily. A medic scribbled notes he might not get the chance to use. The commentators filled the silence with clipped words. "He tagged him," one said. The other only muttered, "Careful. This is different now." The kid tried to pour it on. A spinning elbow missed by inches. A knee thudded against guard. A slap across the gloves on the break. Mockery more than strike. He was laughing again, eyes wide, drunk on the idea of humiliation. Norris wiped the blood with his wrist, neat, leaving a dark smear across his cheekbone. He looked at his opponent without expression, then spoke, soft, certain. "You just made your biggest mistake." The words weren't shouted. They were steady, almost conversational, but the effect rippled. People near the cage repeated it. Then the broadcast carried it, shaky in the voices of those who tried to echo him. The atmosphere shifted. The noise lost some of its bite, replaced by a collective awareness. Something irreversible had been triggered. The kid sneered, tried to act untouched. He darted in again, but Norris's posture had changed. Subtle, his weight grounded differently, his eyes tracking not the fists, but the hips that launched them. The calm had hardened. In the next clinch, everything flipped. Norris's underhook locked in like steel, his head positioned with precision, turning the scramble into a cage the younger man couldn't exit. The kid thrashed, tried to pummel back inside, but found no space. He elbowed again on the brake. Too late, too obvious. The referee barked. The kid only grinned, but the grin looked tight now, pulled at the corners. The blood kept tracing down Norris's cheek, but instead of weakness, it gave weight. He wasn't a myth anymore. He was a man bleeding in front of them, and still immovable. The crowd, even those who'd jeered, began to sense the change. The kid threw wild, an uppercut that cut nothing but air, a hook that clanged off elbow. Norris countered with a body shot, light but precise, reminding everyone of control. The fighter's breathing grew louder, his mouth opening wider. He looked at his glove after wiping sweat from his brow, searching for blood that wasn't there. The arena felt different now. The chants staggered, no longer unified. A woman at ringside whispered to no one, "It's turning." And it was. The fighter beckoned to the crowd, raising his arms, but their reply came late. His own body betrayed him, shoulders sagging, a tiny stumble in his stance. Norris advanced by a fraction, and suddenly the cage felt smaller. The cut still leaked, but his eyes were colder now. He stepped forward with the kind of certainty that precedes endings. The fighter didn't see it. He was still grinning, still playing to the cameras, convinced blood meant victory. What he hadn't realized, what the crowd began to feel in their bones, was that the real fight hadn't started until just now. The crowd felt the shift before they saw it. The young fighter still grinned, convinced blood meant victory, but his shoulders sagged and his legs no longer carried the same spring. Norris, cut brow and all, stood calmer, more rooted, like the floor itself belonged to him. The referee glanced at the cut, saw no danger, and let them continue. The kid threw combinations meant for cameras, wide, loud, desperate. A high kick skimmed empty air, a spinning punch thudded against guard. Norris didn't bite. He slipped, blocked, let the flurry pass, then tapped a rib with a short counter, enough to show he was reading the rhythm, not reacting to it. The noise in the arena bent. Cheers sharpened into something raw, half awe, half dread. Phones trembled in raised hands. Even those who'd wanted the upset began to realize what they were watching. The kid attacked again, harder, throwing a wild kick that promised spectacle. Norris stepped just enough to the side. The heel cut through air. In the space that opened, the older man planted, turned, and fired the shortest, cleanest right hand possible. The sound was different, sharp, final. The young fighter's eyes stayed open a second too long, then his legs folded and the canvas caught him. The entire arena froze. Silence pressed down, heavier than the noise before. Norris didn't raise his arms. He didn't celebrate. He stood over the fallen fighter, blood drying on his cheek, and waited until the referee waved him closer. Then he crouched, speaking quietly, though the microphones caught every word. Real strength is respect. And you didn't bring any, it wasn't gloating. It was a line carved into stone. The referee waved it off. Knockout. Medics rushed in. The young fighter blinked up at the lights, dazed, pride broken in ways his jaw wasn't. His corner shouted to rouse him, but the arena's focus was elsewhere. First came silence, then the eruption. Cheers, boos, applause, whistles. Half the crowd screamed his name, half drowned them out. On the big screens, the replay looped. The miss, the step, the punch. Over and over, proof that the ending had been inevitable once the mistake was made. Norris stepped back, letting the medics work. He wiped at the cut, leaving a streak across his cheekbone like punctuation at the end of a story. Cameras closed in. Every network had its shot. And then the chaos bent again. The young fighter's agent stormed ringside, grabbing a microphone from a staffer. His tie was crooked, his voice shaking with fury and calculation. "This isn't over," he bellowed. "You'll hear from us again." No references, no rules. A real fight. The words hit the crowd like another punch. Gasps, cheers, outrage all at once. Security stepped in, hands raised, unsure whether to stop him. The promoter smiled thinly, already counting potential dollars. Reporters leaned over barricades, pens scratching furiously. Norris didn't rise to it. He looked once at the agent, then past him, to the crowd, to the families, to the faces that weren't shouting. He gave them a nod. Quiet, almost private. Cameras caught it anyway. The agent screamed again. "No edits! No rules! We demand a rematch!" He pointed into the nearest lens as though the entire country was on trial. Some fans booed him, others chanted for it, and the sound twisted into chaos. The kid, still woozy, managed to stand with help. His eyes searched for something. Anger, pride, maybe shame, but found only confusion. Norris gave him one last look, steady, not cruel, then turned toward the tunnel. Flashes followed him, reporters yelling questions he didn't answer. His steps were even, shoulders square, as if he'd just finished a workout, not dropped a man half his age in front of millions. Behind him, the agent still shouted, feeding microphones with promises of revenge. The words mixed with the roar of the crowd until they became indistinguishable noise. And then the broadcast caught its last perfect frame. Norris disappearing into the tunnel's shadow, the fallen fighter seated on his stool, and the agent screaming, "This isn't the end!" The arena held its breath, knowing that if there was a next time, it wouldn't be this civilized, and it might not be safe at all.